Okay.
Hello, today the claim I will be responding to is Monica's claim that occasional spanking, if administered appropriately, has a positive impact on children. Monica's secondary claims are that occasional spanking establishes a much needed respect for the parent or guardian, and that occasional spanking successfully disciplines disobedient children. And my response to these claims are that my opponent had flawed and theoretical and insufficient evidence cited in her argument, and that my opponent failed to fully support her main claim that spanking has a positive impact on children. In her first supporting claim, my opponent stated that parents are responsible for shaping their children's behavior, then goes on to say that parents play an integral role in helping children to understand how to respect their elders, peers, future authority figures, and she then says that reasoning and taking away privileges don't always work as discipline. However, she fails to state why spanking does actually establish this authoritative respect, and also fails to mention other forms of discipline outside of spanking. In Parent Magazine, which is another source that she cited, it states that timeout, modeling appropriate behavior, positive reinforcement, rewarding good behavior, giving the child choices, withdrawing from conflict, and even just saying no are other forms of discipline outside of spanking that should be resorted to before spanking. My opponent's argument is also flawed in that it relies mainly on theoretical evidence rather than actual statistical evidence. There was an instance that she gave of an unruly child at a supermarket, and she states that maybe teaching this at home could prevent them from acting like this in public. She also claims that spanking might help prevent the child from a possible form of endangerment, like touching a hot stove, running into the street, or talking to strangers. Again, there's no theoretical support. Again, this is theoretical support rather than a factual study, and it gives no further explanation of why these specific behaviors can be prevented through spanking. In addition, one of the very few statistical evidences that she does give is from Parent Magazine. She opened with a poll in the beginning saying that there was a poll in which 1,000 readers were surveyed, and it was recorded that 81% had spanked their child at least once, while 22% had spanked their child once a week or more. Although the opponent cited this to communicate that a majority of the population spanks their children, the article then goes on to suggest that striking a child often backfires and makes the child more, not less, unruly. In a 2010 pediatric study, 3-year-olds spanked more than twice a month were 50% more likely to exhibit hostile tendencies and behavior by age 5. In the same article, Dr. Elizabeth Gershaw, a child development professor at the University of Texas at Austin, conducted a review of 88 spanking studies and found that children who are spanked have a significantly higher risk of aggression, depression, and relationship problems as children and then later as adults. Although this argument then goes on to examine the pro-spanking side, the author concludes by saying that both spanking supporters and detractors have their flaws in their argument. However, the intent in spanking is the key issue, and that many parents have no intention of abandoning corporal punishment. And even though pro-spanking theories have idealized intention, the fact is, as Dr. Siegel of the American Academy of Pediatrics states, that it's very hard to make a violent act loving, and there are healthier and better ways to raise a well-behaved child. So in conclusion, my opponent's claims were theoretical and insufficient. There's very little statistical data that's actually stated in the argument. She relies primarily on theoretical and hypothetical situations rather than pediatric psychological or medical evidence. And because of this subsequently makes her argument seem superficial, theoretical, and flimsy. Thank you.
All right, well, structurally set things up at the beginning, that's fine. I like the general challenge that you're taking to the quality of the evidence that the advocate used as your general approach to responding to this argument. When you get to that first point, you talk about a lack of data on spanking. You discuss that there in fact are alternatives that are effective, and you've got some later statistical data that does make a comparison on spanking versus some other thing that's going on. You kind of challenge the advocate's theoretical examples, and I think that that's a reasonable challenge, although again I think your data on that point was not quite as clear and strong as it could be. It gets better on the second point, which, by the way, I think is labeled a little less clearly than it should have been. At the beginning, I thought it was clear, but in the body of the speech, I didn't think that the labeling was as sharp as it needed to be. And that's when you start presenting your own data on this kind of information about the frequency with which kids are spanked and the consequences that happens there. You do a little bit of contrast on the authority that you're citing here. I think that works really well. I don't know that you got much out of this whole discussion of what people's intention was. I know that there's something there, but it's not very clear, and the way you read it makes it sound like you're not quite sure either, so I think that there's a little bit of an issue there. The best part of the argument, I think, comes right at the end, where you do the contrasting sort of thing that you need to do, which basically says we have theoretical ideas and speculative examples versus a variety of research that reach these conclusions, and that comes from academic sources that seem to be a lot more credible, and so that's why we ought to reach the conclusion that you do. And I thought that that's exactly the kind of comparison that we ought to be doing at the end of the speech. And so even though I thought sometimes the delivery was a little bit mechanical at the beginning, like that last 40 seconds of your presentation, you were done with the notes and everything, and you did exactly what we're looking for there at the end. So that boosts things up a little bit, makes it feel better. Thank you.